Noah, we miss you. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Yeah,
This is
thanks for having me.
great. Rachel, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. I'm Angela. Noah had to tolerate me and my husband for the summer.
She was my summer
That was
pumping mom.
so wonderful that you were able to host Noah. That was such a good contribution for us. And nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you. But I warned him in advance that there would be a downside to living in the lab. And I think there was one night, no, I remember you were up 5 or 6 times as the eagle kept descending on the rock and disrupting the birds. And then Noah would go out, take the photo spot, come back in, sit down, try and finish dinner. 10 minutes later, the process repeated itself. So there were just some nights that the birds were more than challenging to deal with. But nice to see you, Noah. We miss you.
Yeah, you guys too.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the Friends of Haystack Rock Library Lecture Series, the extended Puffin Lecture Series. My name is Hannah, and I am a board member with the Friends of Haystack Rock. I'm so honored to be a part of this board that does such cool work here in Cannon Beach, Oregon. Just a beautiful location to be. I was teasing Noah earlier about the summer. We had a lot of rainy days, and today it's just absolutely gorgeous. It was actually really interesting because I kept thinking about fog rolling in, and if there are people who have never seen the fog roll in, because today that's what it was, fog rolling in and then bright, beautiful, hot sun. So it's been a day here in Cannon Beach, but absolutely gorgeous. And if you are in town, I hope you got to enjoy some of that coolness as it came through, because I know, we're missing the puffins. So there's something we need to look forward to. I know the winter and the king tides is something that I look forward to each year. And we have a couple other things that are coming up that I want you to be aware of. So this is our last library lecture for the extended series, but we are going to have our normal lecture series start up in November. October, we're taking a break. November 10th will be our first library lecture series for this next cycle. So make sure to check out our Facebook page, our website, and all that stuff to figure out, who's going to be speaking and how we're going to be doing it. We're planning on doing Zoom for the next couple more months, but keep an eye out on our page because we, of course, love to see you in person as we're able to. So keep a lookout for that for our November lecture series. Also coming up is the Earth and Ocean Arts Festival, and that is 2 weekends from now. So September 18th is one large event that we'll need tons of volunteers for. So if you're in the area, make sure to join us. There's 5 nonprofits that are coming together to create this giant sea star created out of people. It'll be a really cool project. And if you're not in the area, make sure to tune in afterwards. I'm sure it'll be on social media, Facebook and all that. So you can see what I mean when I say we're going to create the largest sea star. But if you are in town, you want to participate in that, that'll be on September 18th at 3:45 p.m. at 2nd Street. Also, we'll be at the Jeffrey Hull Gallery earlier in that day to talk about Haystack Rock and all the cool things that you can see out there and how to be a part of our organization. So that's a couple things. Puffins, of course, are gone for the season. We said goodbye to them a couple weeks ago on the beach. We had spotting scopes and, waved as they flew off. And that was a ton of fun. So thank you if you were able to join us for that. I had just a great time talking puffins with people. And I know a couple other board members were out there talking puffins too. And then one thing that Noah will mention during his presentation is his Birds with Fish project submission, and he'll include a website too. So keep that in mind. If you have any lingering photos of puffins with fish in their beaks, this is an opportunity to use that for science. So I think that is all my beginning things, but I would really like to welcome Noah and Rachel to the lecture series. And before we get started, I do have one other thing. If you have any questions and you want to ask Noah or Rachel, we'll ask them questions at the end. So make sure to put it in the chat on Facebook Live and we'll ask those questions. And then you got to tune in until the end to hear your answers. And if you'd like to come back and watch this again, we do post our YouTube, the videos to our YouTube and on Facebook Live as well. And there is also another option to use closed captions on Facebook Live. So that should be on the bottom of the screen. And I'll put in the comments on the Facebook Live in just a moment when I finish talking, how to access those closed captions if you'd like to hear those. So Rachel, Noah, thank you so much for joining us and take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. Let's see, I have to share my screen real quick. So tonight, I'll be starting off with our talk, Seabird Seafood, investigating the diet of tufted puffin chicks at Haystack Rock, Cannon Beach, through non-invasive community-focused activities. And my name is Rachel Orban. I'm an assistant professor, a research professor at Hatfield Marine Science Center, based in Newport. So I too enjoyed the sunny day with fog rolling in down here on the Central Coast. And then I'll be joined by Noah Delinacek, who has spent the summer at Cannon Beach. So some of you hopefully met him in the mornings and the evenings while he was out on the beach chasing tufted puffins with his camera. So I thought I'd start out just a little bit about me and my connection to tufted puffins. I've been working with seabirds now for almost 20 years, and my first experience working with seabirds was right out of university. I volunteered for the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge on a small island, East Amatouli Island, as part of the Barren Island groups in the Gulf of Alaska. And we were there to monitor murres and kittiwakes, tufted puffins, storm petrels. And I spent a lot of time working in the puffin colony. We were doing chick growth, so pulling chicks out of burrows and measuring how fast they were growing. And we also did diet sampling. So we used a sort of the standard method of collecting diet data from tufted puffins by taking small screens and walking through the colony and stuffing the screens inside the burrow entrance. So when the adult flies back into the colony, it drops a load of fish. And then a few hours later, the researchers walk through the colony again and pick up the fish and unblock the burrow. And that provides a really good way of collecting a bill load from an adult bird and providing fish that you can identify, you can weigh them, you can measure them. So you can really quantify puffin diets that way when you have an accessible large colony. After working on the Barren Islands, I spent an additional 2 summers working with tufted puffins in Kodiak, Alaska. I was working as a field technician on a large project that was run by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we worked at multiple colonies. We were also monitoring chick growth, reproductive success, diets. We were catching birds and measuring their stress levels, looking at other biochemical markers to better understand their diets before they were breeding, differences in diet between adults and chicks, things like that. And that was all part of a PhD thesis written by Corey Williams. So if you would like more details, there's a number of papers that he wrote from that work that provide all the nitty-gritty details. But again, we were using this traditional method of burrow screening to sample the diets of tufted puffin chicks. So fast forward, I mentioned I am currently an assistant professor at OSU. I am the PI of the Seabird Oceanography Lab, and I've been working in this position since 2018. And we do all sorts of applied ecological research focusing on seabirds. And we really take all different kinds of approaches to tackle various problems that come our way. My technical background, I have a lot of expertise in biologging, but I've worked as a field biologist doing a lot of different field observations, physiological sampling, other things like that. So if you want more details about what my lab does in general, please check out our website. It's you can find it in the Hatfield Marine Science Center website. And one of the projects that the Seabird Oceanography Lab has been doing since 2007 is monitoring Yaquina Head, the Seabird colony at Yaquina Head. So it's based here on the Central Coast, just north of Newport. Hopefully everyone here listening in has had a chance to visit Yaquina Head in the summertime when the common murres are there. If not, it's a wonderful place to stop by and check out. In addition to the common murres, there's, I think, 8 seabird species that are breeding there. And we also monitor cormorants, both the Brandt's cormorants and the pelagic cormorants that are nesting there. And we just finished our 20th season monitoring the common murres. And the thing about common murres is they're really easy to monitor in this way that you can watch them. So this is a slide that just highlights some of the sort of similarities between murres and tufted puffins, but the really big difference, of course, is that common murres are nesting, they're surface nesters, they're nesting on top of the rocks. You can watch them through a spotting scope and you can actually see their egg, you can see their chick when it hatches, you can see the parent bringing in fish and feeding the chick. So those, that lifestyle, being a surface nester, really allows us to get a lot of data from. And then we have the tufted puffin that nests in burrows, so they're much more challenging to work with. But when we think about common murres and tufted puffins, they are, relatively similar. So we know common murres, they can dive really deep, but they're typically diving to depths of 40, 50 meters, and that's probably what tufted puffins are doing. They both have high wing loading and flight is energetically costly for them. Common murres are very special in that they have extended parental care. So when the chick fledges, it goes out to sea with the male parent and the male parent feeds it at sea. But for the tufted puffins, the chicks fledge solo. So they need to, when they fledge, they have to find their own way out at sea. And for the common murres, we have done some tracking from populations in Oregon, and we found that birds go north to the Salish Sea and even as far north as Alaska in the winter. But for the tufted puffins, generally winter range is unknown for birds from specific colonies, and certainly we know very little about where the birds that breed in Oregon are spending their winters. Oops. So at Yaquina Head, these are the these are the types of data that we can collect at Yaquina Head with common murres because they are these surface nesting seabirds and reasonably easy to study. So we can follow nests and get reproductive success of individual nests. We can quantify chick diets, and we do this with a spotting scope and a digital SLR camera. We take pictures of birds as they bring fish in. We can watch nests and actually quantify the foraging effort or prey delivery rate. So we watch a set of 10 nests for an entire day and count how many times each chick gets fed. And that gives us a metric of how hard birds are working to feed their chicks. And if you have visited Yaquina Head, you're probably aware, well, anywhere on the Oregon coast, that we have eagles and seabirds have really interesting dynamics where eagles flush and disturb seabird colonies. And this is certainly a drama that's been played out at Yaquina Head for, I guess, almost 10 years. So every year we do monitor the disturbances that the eagles cause at the colony, and we were able to quantify the pressure that they're causing on the colony, how frequently birds are flushed, and then also how many eggs and adult birds or murs are taken. So along with the eagles, we also get secondary predators, birds like gulls and crows and things that come and steal and eat eggs and chicks as well. And then finally, because murs are surface nesting seabirds, the US Fish and Wildlife Service is able to do an annual aerial colony count. So they fly the coast of Oregon and they can take photos of the colonies from the air. And from that, we can have data on population size. And I talked about diet sampling of murs a little bit, but I wanted to emphasize this, that murs are really great species for this type of approach of using photos to identify what they're bringing back to their fish. So common murs in particular, more so than their northern cousin, the thick-billed murs, the common mur comes into the colony. They often hold their fish up high. They kind of show it off a little bit. So there's time for people to take photos of the bird with the fish before it gets fed to the chick. Murs bring one fish back at a time to feed their chicks, so that makes it easier to see, in a blurry photo, what is the fish, like which tail goes to which head, because there's just one head and there's one tail and they're connected. But it is still challenging to photograph these birds as they come in. But in the end, it really has been a great non-invasive method for us to document chick diet each year. And this is a slide that shows some example prey species from common murs. You can see when you zoom in, our photo quality tends to be pretty blurry, but we're still able to see diagnostic features on the fish. So tail shape, where the fins are in some cases coloration. Certainly sand lance have a very distinctive body shape, flatfish as well. So we can use those signatures and we put together basically a key so that we can key out the different species that are in our photographs. And this is the time series that we've built of common mur chick diets. And so again, this every year it takes a lot of effort to photograph a large number of birds carrying fish. In recent years, our target number of identifiable prey species is around 100 bill loads. But when we put all the years together, we can start to see patterns and really relate these data to conditions on the Oregon coast, what other populations of marine organisms are doing, and we have a much better sense of where murs fit into the ecosystem. So in the past, there were more sand lance in their diets. In recent years, since about 2010, birds have been consuming more smelts. And because we're also monitoring reproductive success, we can relate their diet to reproductive success. And in this case, we have some preliminary results that indicate that actually when birds are eating more smelts, they tend to actually not do as good. So they have lower reproductive success. They fledge less chicks. And we think that smelts are more adaptable to various conditions, and higher proportion of smelt may reflect suboptimal conditions for preferred forage fish. So that's what we can do when we have a bird that is easily observable, and we have been observing them for a really long time. In contrast, we know very little about tufted puffins in Oregon, and I should present this with the caveat that I have only really been thinking about tufted puffins in Oregon seriously since Noah approached me last fall. My sense was that there's such a small population that it would be really hard to do anything meaningful with them without causing disturbance to the small number of birds that are here on the coast. The data that we do have from surveys done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is really sparse, and it's really unclear. We know that in the past there were more tufted puffins, and now we know that there's less. And there hasn't been a full survey a full coast survey since 2008. But Noah will talk about some surveys that they did this summer, which is super exciting. And my personal interpretation of looking at the reports from Haystack Rock is that the work that's been done there really suggests that, right now it seems like the population is somewhat stable, at least not continuing this very extreme decline. But we're not seeing signs of population recovering to those former levels. So one hypothesis for the decline of tufted puffin populations in Oregon is changing marine food webs. We can look back at environmental conditions and say, generally things from 1980 onward were dominated by a positive Pacific decadal oscillation, which comes with warmer water temperatures. So, sure, maybe that had an influence on the decline of tufted puffin, but we don't, with 2 data points in there and like exactly when those colonies declined and how it all happened, we don't really have a conclusive story. But one thing that, could help us better link tufted puffins to these physical conditions is getting a better sense of what are tufted puffins actually eating on the Oregon coast. And this is a thesis published in 1985 where they worked at Goat Island. And this is, as far as I know, the only diet data from tufted puffins on the Oregon coast. But if anybody else has found any other obscure references, please send them our direction. And there's very limited information inside this thesis. So they worked on Goat Island in 1981 and 1982, and they recorded 13 prey items in 1981 and 39 prey items in 1982. So if you're say that a tufted puffin is bringing about 4 items of prey back in a bill load, this could be the resulting from just 13 meal deliveries to a chick. So it's a really small sample size of what birds are feeding their chicks. But we do, from this data, we do have a set of species that certainly were prey items for tufted puffins. This is a recent paper looking at tufted puffin chick diets from Alaska along the Aleutian Islands. I think the colony that I was talking about is off the map, but it's somewhere over here, if you can see my pointer, a little bit to the east of Kodiak Island. And we know from this work, and of course all the years of data collection that went into it, that in Alaska, tufted puffins are feeding their chick a really wide range of prey species. And each colony, there's a different proportion of prey items that are brought back to feed their chicks. And the interesting part about this paper is they found that all this variation in dietary composition and what the birds are eating didn't really influence chick condition. So the birds were able to forage on what was available near their colony and raise healthy, successful chicks. But we know in Oregon, our population is declining. We don't really know, what is the weak link in that chain, if it's fledgling success, if it's adult survival. There's different things that could all compound together to cause populations to decline. But in the end, having information on chick diets from tufted puffins would be really great for the Oregon coast. So that's where I'll turn this talk over to Noah. And before he starts, I want to highlight that, you know, when we were talking about this and developing this project, we had seen a couple pictures of tufted puffins with fish in their bills that were taken at Cannon Beach. And that was it. We had 3 pictures and we had a plan, and we weren't really sure if it was actually going to work. So it was really, I think, a really exciting thing that Noah was able to get out on the beach and try this method out and try actually to, you know, spend the time at Cannon Beach and take photos of puffins with prey. Let's see. I think I stopped
Yes.
sharing my screen.
Thanks, Rachel. Sorry, give me 1 sec. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Noah, and thanks for having me talk at this as well. So now that Rachel's given you guys a really good ecological and scientific background on puffins in Oregon and MERS and really puffins along the whole West Coast, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit more about my day-to-day in this first season of this project. What I saw, what I experienced, some cool stories. So yeah. A little bit about me and my background. I just finished the graduate certificate in wildlife management at Oregon State, and now I'm beginning the professional science master's of fisheries and wildlife administration. When we launched this project, I liked to make it fancy and called myself the project coordinator for Birds of Fish. So give myself an extra line on my signature. And I'm also affiliated with Rachel's lab, the Seabird Oceanography Lab. Rachel is my advisor and my mentor. So that's my background a bit. Before getting into wildlife science, my experience was a bit different. In 2018, I graduated from Portland State with a bachelor's in mathematics and physics. I then went to Belgium to pursue graduate work in astrophysics, and I understood nothing and didn't like it. So I started thinking about what I really wanted to do, and knew that I wanted to be involved in conservation and wildlife, specifically in Oregon, having grown up here. I started a marine management program, also not the right fit. Finally got an internship with another lab at Oregon State called the Geospatial Ecology of Marine Megafauna Lab. And in 2020, helped them with a gray whale project in Port Orford. Fell in love with Oregon State and wildlife research, and very soon after reached out to Rachel, and the rest is history. So Rachel's already given you guys the background on tufted puffins, but I'll just reiterate it for the sake of doing it. In 1988, a coastwide survey counted around 5,000 birds in Oregon. By 2008, it was down significantly to something like 400. And like Rachel said, from then on until this summer, there hasn't been a full coastwide survey. And so it's hard to say, but especially at Haystack, it seems that the population has remained somewhat stable, but hasn't been able to recover to numbers that we would expect. Puffins along the Oregon coast use offshore islands or headlands, and the Oregon Islands National Wildlife Refuge protects over 1,800 of those islands, all of the islands along the Oregon coast. And there are only a handful of those 1,800 that are that remain quite important to puffins. Historically, many of them had some presence of birds, but now there's just a handful. And so we can really target and pinpoint where we're looking for the puffins in Oregon. So, excuse me. Basically, we have 6 islands left along the Oregon coast that we know have an annual presence of birds. Haystack Rock and Cannon Beach, of course, but also Chief Kiawanda Rock and Pacific City, Three Arches Three Arch Rocks National Wildlife Refuge in Tillamook Oceanside area, Island Rock off the coast of Port Orford, Hunter's Island, although we're not sure if there still are puffins there any longer, and Goat Island near Brookings. We did get to go on to Hunter's Island this year to check for, do some burrow checks, but unfortunately we didn't find anything. And, but that doesn't necessarily mean they aren't there. Could just be timing or where we looked. So one question that I've been asked is, out of all these rocks that have tufted puffins still left, why Haystack Rock for a prey study? And there's a few reasons. One of them is that Haystack Rock has one of Oregon's largest remaining puffin colonies. Something between 60 and 100 birds are still on Haystack. The most important thing, especially for us trying to come up with a non-invasive method for investigating prey composition is diet composition, is that Haystack is visible from shore. So we can see the birds coming and going from their burrows while standing on the beach using binoculars and a scope and a relatively high-powered camera. Whereas the other islands that I listed before are all far enough offshore that shore-based observations would not allow us to take pictures where we would be able to see what the puffins are actually carrying. And the third thing that makes Cannon Beach and Haystack really important is that there are a handful of groups that are really passionate about puffin research and conservation. And so there's a network of support to do projects like this around Cannon Beach and Haystack, which is a really important part of how successful this project has been so far. So my days at Haystack Rock were never the same, although always the same in a way. It always started pretty early in the morning, tide dependent, and there was usually some sort of drama, whether it was an eagle flushing the rock or a family asking me what the flying penguins were, or things like that. So there was always something exciting going on. But there was a handful of tasks that each day in the field I really focused on for data collection and also for the outreach portion of our project, which is also really important. The first task and the most important task was to collect pictures of puffins carrying fish. And the picture on the left is a picture that I got in early August. And the picture on the right is from the same day, also a day where I had some collateral damage on my raincoat. I observed on 29 different days from July, the beginning of July to the end of August. And I individually captured something like 7,000 pictures. It could be more or less. I haven't processed all of them quite yet. So far, I've counted 10 of those 29 days where I have a picture of a puffin with prey that seems suitable to ID what they're carrying. So that seems exciting to me. I came into this season really not knowing what to expect or how much data we would collect, or I didn't even know if we would get pictures that would be used. So as I'm scrolling through the pictures, we're still processing. So unfortunately, for anybody looking for an answer of what the puffins are eating today, you're not going to get it yet, but I would be happy to come back to a friend's lecture later when we have the results from our work. So the second thing that I focused on at Haystack Rock was collecting data on disturbances, like Rachel mentioned, has been done at the Quina Head for the last 10 years. And there's been some work, I should have put a reference on this slide, but there's been some work that has shown that bald eagle populations on the north coast of Oregon have increased pretty significantly over the last bit. And we don't know if it necessarily impacts puffins who are burrow nesting and not on the surface. Some might not be impacted quite as much as something like MERS, but nevertheless, it could be important information for us. So the second thing I did was every day I was out at the beach in the mornings or the evenings. I would record when an eagle would arrive at the rock and when an eagle would leave, and make some notes generally of how the MERS and the seagulls responded to the event. This is a quick video. The seagulls responding. So you can see that this was just a few seconds after the eagle had gotten close to the rock and landed on the backside of Haystack. And the MERS didn't react too much, but the seagulls sort of balloon into this like composed chaos, it feels like, as they try and deter the eagle away. The eagles were very successful this year at getting seagull chicks. I probably witnessed 6 or 7 occasions where they carried 1 or even 2 chicks away, a single bald eagle. So there was quite some drama. And of course, people on the beach loved watching it happen. And I was like, no, it's not good. Over the 2 months, I observed for about 100 hours on the beach, which every day I felt like I wasn't doing enough. But then when I counted up my hours, I thought, wow, that's a lot. And the third task, as I go on a rant here, the third task that was really important for this project was I was on the beach every morning and in the evening taking pictures, and I had my equipment and I was taking notes in my notebook. So I had lots of folks walk up to me and ask questions, what are you looking at? Or some people were more involved and they knew that we had puffins and they were asking me where they burrowed. And so I kind of assumed a role of communicating with folks on the beach around Haystack who might be interested in learning a bit more about tufted puffins and other seabirds and sort of the status and how research was working. And I actually had a lot more people engage in longer conversations than I expected. So that was really a cool experience to see people interested in what we were doing and wanting to learn more. And when I'd give them a basic answer, they'd ask more questions, which is always fun to chat birds. So one thing that we did on top of taking running the project for Tufted Puffin prey photos is we launched a community science effort that's coastwide in Oregon called Birds with Fish. And Birds with Fish is designed to do the same thing that I did this summer, taking photos of puffins, but instead of me being the sole photographer, we're trying to get nature photographers on the Oregon coast or that travel to the Oregon coast to take pictures of puffins, but also other coastal birds carrying fish, squid or other marine invertebrates, and then submit them to the Birds with Fish website so that we can create a database of not only what tufted puffins are eating all up and down the coast, but what other fish-eating birds might be eating as well. And that was really fun. I had no idea what to expect before designing and launching Birds with Fish, but it's really turned into a project of passion for me and I think for our lab. and it's been fairly successful for its first season. The main goals of the project, of course, are to, get a better general understanding of what many different bird species in Oregon are eating along the coast, or what fish they're eating along the coast. I'm sorry. But it's also to, like any community science or citizen science project, engage people who might be interested in being involved in the research or the outreach portion of ecological research to help us raise awareness about why it's important to research these birds and why conservation of certain species is important. And thirdly, Birds with Fish is meant to illuminate that shore-based photography of birds along the coast is a viable method to study bird diets. So Birds with Fish, I got a lot of pictures from Birds with Fish so far from photographers. We've had 10 individual photographers that have submitted more than 80 photos of puffins, murres, black oyster catchers, and osprey, all with fish and other species, with date ranges from 2015 to 2021. So that's been really cool to have folks feel inspired to dig through their archives and pick out some old pictures for us. I think that we're going to have a lot more photographers as the summer comes to an end. I've just in the last few days gotten emails from quite a few folks that I had been in contact with before, who are very excited about submitting pictures that they took this summer and going through their collections. So that's been cool. Birds with Fish is also really collaborative. So we've reached out to lots of coastal organizations. Friends of Haystack Rock has been vital for us, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife as well. But other groups up and down the coast, like Haystack Rock Awareness, Shoreline Education for Awareness, which is based in Bandon, among many other groups, have helped us spread the word about Birds with Fish. And in turn, more people are getting involved in submitting pictures. We've also had Birds with Fish, help with Birds with Fish from the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, who is the project's fiscal sponsor. And they have a lot of experience with public forward outreach. So they've helped us put together some really cool videos and sort of like presentation materials. And last but not least, we had randomly a photographer named Keith Wallach, who's a North Coast based photographer, reach out, and he was really inspired to get involved with the project. And he's been vital and has also bought into Birds with Fish as a project of passion. So Birds with Fish has been a really useful tool to help us with the tufted puffin prey photo collection. These are some cool pictures that I was able to capture and get through before this talk. Like I said, unfortunately, I'm not going to have any figures for you guys showing diet composition quite yet, but these are a couple pictures of murres. I was able to get quite a few pictures of murres with fish. They fly pretty low to the beach at around Haystack. And like Rachel said, they do seem to be pretty proud of their catch. So it's like they're showing it off. These are a couple pictures of puffins with their catch. This was the same day, but two different bill loads, even though it looks very similar. And in general, this was about the best quality of prey photos that I was able to capture from the project. But as you can see, it does seem like these pictures are usable, and boy, was it fun to track the puffins through the air. At the beginning of the summer, I could barely track the birds through the air. I was like trying to find the puffins in the sea of murres and seagulls. By the end of the summer, I could pick them out with my naked eye and follow them. So that was really cool for me to see that process happen. This is just an interesting process of images that I snapped of my favorite puffin that I observed all summer, that I named Cliff, who lives in that burrow right there. And he had a neighbor who was off to fish. And I captured this happening. And so I thought, well, these guys might think it's cool just to look at. But in addition to the prey photos at Haystack, I also got to be involved in the 2021 coastwide tufted puffin surveys with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with Sean Stevenson, the Oregon Coast wildlife biologist. I wasn't able to participate in the entire survey, but I did get to participate on the North Coast at Haystack, all the way through to Pacific City and down around Port Orford and Gold Beach near Island Rock. And Hunters. The picture in the middle is the burrow checks that we did at Hunters Rock. That was pretty fun. I don't know if there's ever been anybody as excited to stick their arm in a dark hole in the middle of a hill, but I was very into it. And one cool thing about these surveys was that when we checked Island Rock near Port Orford, I had gotten some emails from folks around Port Orford, and I had observed the colony at the beginning of the summer on a different boat and seen quite a few puffins. And with the survey, we had enough folks on board to make a count of the birds. And we counted something like 60 birds at Island Rock, I think. That could be more or less by 10, I can't remember, but more than we expected. So that was really a highlight of the summer for me, and I think for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife team as well. Going to that island and sort of not expecting much, but seeing so many birds was really cool. There were also a lot of birds at Three Arch Rocks, a national wildlife refuge, so that was also good to see. And getting the experience to assist U.S. Fish and Wildlife in a survey was really useful to me getting a different perspective of the birds from the water and seeing different colonies other than Haystack. Nothing cool happens in this video, but it's just bird's eye. And Sean's with us today. I saw he would know better, but I think that's right around Cape Lookout. But I'm not positive, so don't quote me on that. Like I said, we did get support from the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, which is a nonprofit that provides fiscal and outreach support to various research projects in Oregon. And Oregon Wildlife Foundation did give us a small grant, but also their team has been really helpful in helping us develop some outreach products and coming up with exciting ways that we can connect with community and look for ways to fund this project moving forward. So it's been really cool to work with a group like that. I just have to say that this whole project has been really collaborative, and the community science side of Birds with Fish has allowed me to reach out to so many Oregon Coast conservationists and conservation groups and businesses that are interested in getting involved. And I loved watching the birds. That's my passion. It's my favorite thing to do. But the most rewarding thing this summer was having so many people buy into the project and help us spread the word either through social media or whatever it was. And Oregon Wildlife Foundation was very helpful in helping us to do that. If you're interested in their role in our project, you can check out myowf.org. Don't put .com. It's a very different experience. And I just want to say a special thanks to Keith. I don't think he's with us tonight, but Keith Wallach Photography, if anybody's looking for beautiful pictures of wildlife, Keith's work is phenomenal. And without Keith's technical assistance this summer, the amount of pictures that I was able to capture would not have been possible. So big shout out to Keith Wallach, who has also become a very good friend of mine throughout the season. So that's been really nice. And that's basically it from me. I just want to say thanks to all of our supporters. I couldn't fit them all on the list. I'd like to say thanks to Jim and Angela Benton for putting up with me for a few months, and everybody else that was able to help. Sean, I know you're here. Thank you for all your help. And that's it from me.
Well, thank you both so much. We do have a couple questions, and anyone who's on Facebook, make sure if you have a question to drop it in the comments. And if we catch it soon enough, then we'll ask. Nancy wanted to mention that MERS have been sighted in the ocean near Coos Bay, bringing in squid for their fledged young. And then Nicole asked, will the results of the 2021 U.S. Fish and Wildlife Tufted Puffin survey results be available online somewhere to read? Sean might be the one to answer that.
Yeah.
Sean says yes. Thanks, Sean. And what are plans for next year, Noah?
That's a good question. The plans are hopefully to run this project again. I don't know that I will necessarily be the one taking the pictures. I could be, but this summer was a pilot season, and we tried out some different things, and we're trying to see what worked best. And it turns out that taking pictures from the shore at Haystack does seem viable. So the goal would be to run the project again, because multiple years of data are much better than a single year of data. So I don't know, maybe Rachel has a different response, but.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to keep in mind is that Noah's done maybe not the only fun part of the project, but we do have the challenging part of the project still remaining, is going through the photos and transforming those, 7,000 images into data. And our expectations for this project were, if we could get maybe 30 pictures of bill loads that we could identify, that was the bar that we set for ourselves. But even half that, I think we would be really happy with. So we do have, Noah has a lot of work ahead of him over this fall and winter to go through and ID those bill loads. But yes, hopefully we'll be able to do this again next year, because certainly we've learned a lot in how photos can be taken and what equipment would work better and things like that.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question. Are there volunteer opportunities in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so really, Birds with Fish, we're focused on getting pictures of tufted puffins and the prey that they're carrying, but it's also important for us to get pictures of what other coastal birds are carrying. So volunteer opportunities are endless. If you're at the coast any time of year and you capture a picture of a bird along the coast, it doesn't necessarily have to be a seabird even, but along the coastline that's carrying fish or a crab or something like that, we're interested in all of that information. So if you want to volunteer and you're at the coast, just take your camera on your walk with you, and that's volunteering for our project.
Awesome.
Yeah, we set the website up so it should remain up for, hopefully for years, in terms of being a place where people can go and deposit photos.
Okay, and then Nancy was wondering, could cameras be used to look into the burrows, kind of like they do with tortoise cameras or tortoise burrows in like Florida?
I can take this one. Yes, definitely. So that's one of the things that we, tossed around is the potential for setting up, maybe starting with trail cameras. They're a bit more low tech in that you don't have to put them in the burrow, and you can uh, they can just take photos when birds or motion happens. But they would be a really great way to expand this project to other islands where there's a reasonably sized puffin population, and we can set up cameras nearby burrows and essentially take photos of birds delivering prey back to their nests. But to do that, we need funding, we need to be able to access the islands, and we also need quite a bit of on the ground knowledge about where the birds are nesting, and how best to program the cameras and where to point them. So there's quite a few things that we would need to work through to actually make that happen. But I think it's certainly feasible for us to go that route.
Okay, awesome. So got a lot more volunteer questions. So that you guys have really found a project that people want to interact with, which is awesome. Would you consider using volunteers to help identify fish species in the photos?
I think it might be hard. At this point, we don't have that. I don't think we'll have that many that we really have to stare at, but I think it's going to take a pretty technical eye in terms of working through what the possible prey items are and what diagnostic features we want to use. I mean, if you're a volunteer that has really great knowledge of forage fish and squid and things like that on the Oregon coast, please, yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And then Cindy was wondering if you had any opportunity to interact with Tim Halloran, who has been on the beach collecting data and observing fish food that they're carrying back and forth.
Yes, Tim and I worked really closely together this summer. At least a few times a week, we would chat about what he was seeing and what I was seeing, and kind of compare anecdotal information. So Tim was really helpful. Tim also helped us connect with a lot of photographers. So when he would be out on the beach and I wouldn't, people would walk up to them, he would tell them about our project. And we ended up getting some submissions because of Tim's ability to connect with folks. So certainly I worked very closely with Tim, who has also become a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and some of the photos that Tim had taken in previous years of birds, of tufted puffins carrying bill loads, were the inspiration for this project.
Yeah.
It gave us the idea, and that it could be feasible to do.
Oh, and it just showed me that Tim is watching. So Tim, we're talking about you.
Hi, Tim.
So question from Angela, is there an estimated population threshold at which you wouldn't expect tufted puffins to return to Haystack Rock? The population is so small, wondering if there's a critical threshold.
That's an interesting question. I think, typically what we see with seabirds is that they're really nest site faithful, especially burrow nesters, longer lived birds like tufted puffins, common murres, and they will come back to the same nest year after year. You might have aging birds that come back to a colony, but if the number of birds that are there is so low, the young birds that are recruiting back into the population may choose a different spot. But it's hard to know for sure. I wouldn't have an off the cuff number for, it's too small. Like, I think, birds are very individual creatures. So there could be that old puffin that would come back for, 10 years. So who knows?
There are, I mean, just from observing throughout the summer, like Face Rock and Bandon still has a puffin or two. And I know that they used to have quite a few. So that kind of is what Rachel was saying.
Okay, and then also are MERS competing with puffins for prey fish?
That's also a good question. I think generally our answer would be no, sort of an off the cuff answer, but so MERS are a little bit larger in body size. They could probably dive deeper, but in general, maybe they are eating similar prey items and foraging in some of the same places. So certainly there could be an impact of a colony of MERS on puffins, but yeah, it's hard to say how important it might be for the tufted puffins.
Okay, and then I think this is our last question. Noah, while you've been at Haystack Rock over the summer, did you notice any issues with drone disturbance?
Unfortunately, yes, a few times. Couple times there were people flying the drones, not right over the rock, but certainly closer than they should have been. But not as much as I expected, actually, given that there's no signage around Haystack that's really clear and says no drone usage. So yeah, just a few times. And I approached the people and just kind of explained to them the issues with it, and they were all very cordial about it and stopped using it. So it was pretty civil.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us for this library lecture. It was so fun to see, what you've been seeing all year, and I can't wait to find out about next year and how we can participate with you all. You guys have a great school year, and thank everyone for tuning in. As I mentioned at the beginning, this video will live on Facebook, so you can go back and watch. It'll also be available on the Friends of Haystack Rock YouTube channel when I get my act together and post it there. So maybe in the next week or so, you can check it out there, as well as send it to anyone who's not on Facebook. And you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining the Friends of Haystack Rock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentations.
Thanks.